Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the 1904 Club, the Hull City podcast, of course, from the Hull Daily Mail. I got Fletch with me, and Fletch, it's a real shame on the day before Halloween that we've not got Pruts and Burnsy, because I feel like, given it is Halloween, and ghostly ghouls and scary people and all that, we've not got those two.
Maybe they're down the shop. Maybe they're going for last minute costumes or something. They're going to go out trick or treating, perhaps.
I know for a fact that Prutton's got something in his wardrobe. He claims to be away with the family because it's half term, and Burnsy's concocted this story about having some kind of chest infection. That, for me, the week of Halloween and all that sort of stuff, I just think it's just too coincidental. I think. Do you not think?
Maybe if we on Halloween night you see Burnsy doing like a scene from Thriller or The Walking Dead where he's leading loads of zombies through Hull City Hall, perhaps. But no, bless him. He's got an infection, hasn't he? So we wish him all the best.
Yeah. So we wish, in theory, we wish Burnsy the best and hope that he recovers from this apparent disease, and that Pruts has that Pruts has a lovely time in Haddonfield in Illinois. So great stuff.
Nice.
Speaking of The Walking Dead, it was a bit like that in the penalty box at Pride Park on Saturday, wasn't it?
A little bit, yeah. I think I've watched bits back this morning just to refresh my memory, and it feels to me like one of those games it's one that's not going to go down really in memory, to be brutally honest.
Pride Park are, in fairness, but I think it was one of those where, look, I thought Derby were poor. They were good set pieces. You knew that they were going to be a threat, that they would, get a decent ball into the penalty area and cause a problem, and they did throughout the game. But for me, I look back at that game with a great sense of annoyance, because I can't help but feel it's 2 points dropped, that should have been a game where Hull City won with a little bit more quality in the final third. That is a game they would have come away from Pride Park with 3 points. The Burnley game last Wednesday, look, I think we'd all be annoyed with a point, but I think probably before the game we'd have taken a point, given the context of back-to-back defeats. You're playing a team that have just come down from the Premier League in good form, blah de blah. I still think that was 2 points drop, because I thought City were very good at times in the game, and could have won it. Although I did say a point was a fair result, and based on Burnley's improvement in the second half and City's drop off, a point was probably a fair result. Saturday, I just thought they started the game really well. They had a dominant 20-25 minutes. Same at the start of the second half, a dominant 20-25 minutes and got the goal. But they just, in those three wins, against Cardiff, Stoke and QPR, when they got a goal, they put their foot down and they went and got a second and they got a third and they killed the game off. Pride Park, they got the goal and you're like, go on then, go and win the game. Go and get a second goal. And if they got a second goal, Derby weren't coming back from that. But it was a bit like a throwback to last season in some respects. They got in front and then, well, what do we do now? And sat back and allowed Derby to come onto them to a point, and then they give away a death free kick. But Ben Osborne, ball into the box. Goalkeeper was at fault in the sense that he threatened to come. Because he threatened to come, he was out of position. It's a good header from the lad, Dejuan Brown, and it goes in the net. But I think if Panda had stayed on his line or stayed close to his line, he'd get something on it. Ultimately, they don't score.
It's the one thing. I mean, I've been impressed with Panda in the last few weeks, but there's that one little thing that just grates on me slightly is I find when he does come out, there's nothing wrong with a goalkeeper coming out. I'm all for it when it's done correctly, but I think there are times when he gets stuck in the wrong positions, as we found out against Derby with the goal itself. But then where he nearly clattered into Regan Slayton, there was a breakdown in communication and, negatively what happened we could have seen carnage from that and Derby could have gone up and scored. But spin it the other way and positively, they actually created an attack from it, which was really promising. They didn't take it, but I agree with you on that. I'm happy with a point against Burnley, certainly. And watching the game from the South Stand that night, I was actually quite impressed with the pace. We seem to get, it's certainly different being there in the flesh in comparison to watching on telly. You obviously get the real sense of how the game's being played. And I actually quite enjoyed how they played against Burnley.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I love their first half performance. As you said, that was one thing that struck me at times this season, particularly at home. It's been really stodgy, and and for all the talk of fast flowing football, this, that, and the other, at times it's been painfully slow. It really has, and it's been like pulling teeth. Whereas it was against Sunderland, I thought at times, but against Burnley that first half, they shifted it really quickly. They were positive. They played it forward. They looked to get it forward quickly. There was a lot to admire about that first half performance. But again, coming back to Saturday, they had a lot of the ball, but it was at times it got a bit stodgy. They'd sort of lost their way.
A little bit. But I can see improvement. I think we'll maybe talk about Puerta a little bit more in depth, but I think Puerta adds something to that midfield.
Yeah, I do as well.
Even though they haven't won any of these 4 games, I would like to think that I could name the strongest 11 from what we've seen so far, with a couple of players who we haven't seen yet. And I think Puerta is one of those who would, even though I've only seen him really for 2 full appearances, I think that there's promise there that he can be an influential effect on that midfield.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was actually, to be honest, I was surprised that Puerta played at Pride Park. Not for any reason of performance, just the fact that he was a late arrival in August, having not played a huge amount. He's played an under 23 or under 21 game, I should say. Is it? I'm losing myself. Is it under 23 or under 21 now? Whatever it is, anyway.
There is Spaz. There is
yeah, Reses. The Reses, the old Central League. Bring it back. He scored in that game and did well. He obviously played in the friendly out in Antalya. But I was a bit surprised that that in a 3-game week that he was played again, and I did think he tired as the game wore on. But yeah, I've been really impressed with Puerta, and I think he's everything that we kind of hoped he would be and thought he would be, based on what we in the research that I and you and a lot of fans would have done to find out who the hell he is and what he's like. So yeah, I've really liked him, and I think he's actually, over these 3 games in the week, he's built a really good partnership with Xavier Simons, who of course has rattled in 2 goals, and the second one at Pride Park especially was fantastic. It was a really, really good strike, and I'm pleased for him, because he's not always had it easy. Obviously, he was out on loan at Fleetwood last season, and he sort of, in many ways, he benefited over the summer from the situation around the recruitment, the fact that, the lack of recruitment, because there was nobody else to go play in midfield. It was basically him and Regan, because there was nobody else, and he's kind of kicked on. And even with all the signings that they've made in that midfield, they've got 35 midfielders now, and Slater and Simons is rising above those. And now, as I said to him at Pride Park, now you score, if you're adding goals to your game, you almost become undroppable, because he's getting better. And we forget, it's easy to forget, he's only played 20 odd times for the club, and he's still a young boy. He's not got that much championship experience, and there are going to be games where he goes missing, and he comes back and he goes missing. And that is what you get with young players. That rawness and that lack of consistency, that you get with young players. So there are going to be in game where he makes a mistake or he goes missing. But if he can start adding goals, and he should do, really, players in that position should be scoring goals, and now he's got 2 in 2. That should give him a huge amount of confidence, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's a cracking finish, by the way. I think not just to be outside the area, but when I watched it back this morning, he's made like a 270-degree spin, if you like, from when he takes his first touch. He's gone all the way around it, but he's managed to hold his balance and strike it sweetly enough to put it with power and placement past the goalkeeper. And I'm glad to see that, actually. I always thought Simons is one of those players who never really, as you've alluded to, Baz, from the fact that he's gone on loan to Fleetwood previously, never really got that traction of minutes. And I think every player needs that, don't they? Let's be honest. And
Absolutely.
You need, and this is maybe something like players like Burster, for example. We've talked about like how he hasn't really offered anything yet, but he hasn't had the time to do anything really, let's be honest. And I think with Simons now, he looks incredibly settled, and there's that competitive rivalry now in the midfield where you've got Finn Burns who can't even get a look in all of a sudden. And, if you're a lone player, and I'm not trying to delve into Finn Burn's mind by any stretch of the imagination. But if I was a lone player in this situation, I'd be obviously trying to give an extra 1-2% on the 100% I'm already giving to try and say to the gaffer, come on, where's my chance coming? Because then if he's not, Simons becomes undroppable, doesn't he, at the moment?
Yeah, I don't think I would agree. I don't think you can. I think when you look at the team for Saturday against Pompey, Simons is on that team sheet, and I think
I think the whole midfield is at the moment. Yeah. I think that 3's nailed down.
What I would say, and I think we've all on this show talked about Regan Slater over time, and what a fan of him we are, and congratulations to Regan, by the way, for making his 150th appearance for the club at Pride Park. Although it didn't really pan out how he wanted it to, because obviously he got hauled off, and Walter said afterwards that he got taken off because he didn't think he was playing very well. But yeah, I just feel that Regan has been a casualty of the Tim Walter era, really. I don't think, Regan's been a key part of, he was obviously a key figure at times last season, although he found himself, sidelined a bit because of Tyler Morton and Mika Seri kind of nailing down that double pivot position. But I look to Regan on Saturday at Pride Park, and the times he sort of drifted to the wide to the right, and he didn't look himself. He doesn't look himself, and we know that because he doesn't. That's not his position. He doesn't particularly enjoy playing out on the right. He gives his lot. As you could play him in goal, Regan, and he'd give you 1,000% because he's that kind of guy. He will give you a shift no matter where he plays. But it's not just about that. It's about trying to get the best out of your players and playing to their strengths. And I just don't feel that in that 3, when he shifts wide right, that they're getting the best out of him. In that, if he can play more centrally, then you can. But obviously, you've got Puerta and Simons, who are now impressing. And I would imagine against Portsmouth that it would be those two, Simons and Puerta, barring injury again. But yeah, look, there's a lot to like about those two, but they have obviously got a lot of options. Alzate, we know is out until out until after the next break. Finn Burns, as you touched on, can't even get a look in. Casey Palmer, who's admittedly a more attack-minded of that area, but he's having to set off a place off the bench just at the minute. So they've got Malam's out. Malam's out, also injured, so they've got options in there. But it's good. I'm really enjoying watching Puerta, and I think there's a lot. We've only seen him in 3 games, but I think we've seen enough in those 3 games to suggest that there's a player in there that we know, and that there's a lot more to come from him, isn't there?
Yeah, and let's put it this way: Xavi Alonso gave him that opportunity to play just a small handful of games when he was at Bayer Leverkusen as well. So there's clearly good stock in him. There's people in high places who hold him in incredible regard. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him blossom, as I always like to say, when it comes to players at the start of their Hull City careers. And let's have a bit of let's have a bit of consistency in that starting 11, because it's a little bit off topic from what we was planning on discussing about. But do you think the chopping and changing of the team has maybe just affected the results a little bit? Because I think this is the first time really where, as I said earlier, I could probably go with a starting 11 in my mind from what I've seen so far.
I know last week you were washing your hair, so you weren't around, but I asked Prutz that very question, speaking as a midfielder as well as he was during that illustrious career of his. That when you are chopping and changing constantly, it's difficult to get momentum as an individual. It's difficult to build partnerships alongside your teammate. We always talk about partnerships, don't we, on the football pitch? They're obviously one team, but your 2 centre-halves need a partnership. Your left winger and your left back need a partnership, but equally your left-sided defender and your left back and the same on the other side also need to build partnerships, because they need to know where each other's going to be at certain times, and they start to read each other's mannerisms. And when one goes, one starts. There's so much about it that they need to build those relationships with each other. And if every single game it's Simons and Slater, and then it's Slater and Puerta, and then it's Malam and Simons, or it's Zambrano and Slater, it's really difficult. And you aren't going to get, with the best will in the world, you aren't going to get that consistency in individual performance or as a collective, because you're chopping and changing all the time, and we're still seeing, even now, we're still seeing chopping and changing because, you know, and in fairness to Tim Walters, some of it is enforced because of injury. You know, Malem's in the team, although I don't think he's done enough. I've got to be honest, I don't think Malem's done enough consistently to be in the team every week, but that's you know, the manager's selection. Now, obviously, he then gets injured, so they have to make a change, bring somebody else in. You know, Miller comes in against Burnley, gets injured, and we'll come to that in a little while.
Yeah.
Then you have to make that. You have to the change that he made to bring Miller back in at the expense of Kamara. You have to reverse that and bring Kamara back in. And so, and no doubt, Kamara's confidence probably took a knock from being dropped. So it's so many things go into it, and I think that's what we're seeing. We are seeing like little shoots of positivity in the sense that Simons and Puerta have now played 3 in a row. Maybe it will be 4 in a row come Saturday, and they start to build those relationships that are so important fundamentally out on the pitch. If he change, but he may well change it again because we've not seen Zambrano since he came back from international duty. So, you know, where does Zambrano fit into this? Is he going to, you know, are we waiting for Simons to have a poor game so we can kick Simons out and bring Zambrano back in, or are we waiting for Puerta to have a poor game and we can bring Zambrano in alongside Simons? They have got, and then you've got Alzate when he eventually comes back. I mean, that's going to be after the break, and he just got himself sort of, obviously he came on at Norwich and he's sort of starting to get some fitness and get into the rhythm of it, and then he gets injured and he's now out for, you know, a few weeks. So it is hard, and obviously injuries scupper a lot of things. It kills momentum. It sets players back on their fitness schedules. Like Alzate, obviously coming in having not had a pre-season, he's coming in trying to work his way up. He gets a few 10 minutes in, 20 minutes here off the bench, and then bang, he's injured and he's out for a month or 6 weeks, and he's got to almost start the process again. And so you're probably not going to see him properly until towards Christmas. So it is a constant. That chopping and changing is sometimes unavoidable, and that is just unfortunately part and parcel of it. But I do agree that I think we are seeing that little benefit of them two playing together for a period of time.
What about up front?
Well, So Tim came in. We've spoken about this on the pod before. Tim is a fiery character. I don't think there's any. I think every Hull City fan that's either watched, listened to an interview with him, or watched his histrionics on the touchline could argue that he's not a fiery character. And sometimes after a defeat, he comes in a fairly good mood. Sometimes after a defeat, he comes in a bad mood. Sometimes after a win, he doesn't. You know, although that, you know, we've only seen that three times. I think each time he's been fairly happy. But after draws, he's particularly. He can be quite spiky. After the Burnley draw, he was fairly okay, but he was not happy at Pride Park. His first words were expletives.
Really?
Yeah. You could tell obviously by his facial expression and the way he sat down in his chair, and his first word was rhymed with ducked off. So look, I think, and I get it, because if you think he's the manager and you've watched your team play well for probably half the game, you know, look the better side, go in front, and then you've conspired to not win the game, I think you would be, as he was hacked off. And I would suspect the majority of the 2,600 or so that made a lot of noise in that far corner, that they were trudging out of Pride Park disappointed as well, because they hadn't seen their team win. So I think he probably echoed all of our feelings really when he came in. And he referenced the striker situation. He referenced the fact that Chris Beddy missed a good chance, that they're not ruthless enough in the final third. He said it after. I mean, he said that pretty much after every single game, even throughout. I remember standing or sitting in the dugouts at the BIG Stadium, that final pre-season game against Reading, and that was with half a squad, and he referenced lack of ruthlessness. He talked about it when they won out in Antalya last month, early this month. They won 2-0, didn't they, against Alanyaspor, and he referenced the fact they weren't ruthless enough. And we saw it against Burnley. We saw it against Sunderland although it's not the same level. And we saw on Saturday that they created really good moments. They just don't. They don't look great in the final third. There was a good moment. They robbed Derby of possession midway inside their own half, inside the Derby half, and Kamara goes past them out. The defender gets into the box and blazes it over the crossbar. He put another good ball into the back post. Betty a completely air shot, and there was other moments within that game where they, a neutral fact. He doesn't support Hull City, but he's got a keen interest in Hull City now, and he was watching the game, and he was like, and he watched the Burnley game as well. He's watched a lot of City games this season. I got a message from him during the Burnley game. He's like, City just look. I won't use the exact words, but he sort of said City just look useless when they get in the final third. And he said the same again on Saturday. They play some nice football building up, and they get into the final third, and it's that they're like they become like a non-league team. They don't know what they're doing, and it's like, and maybe like some people say that's a bit harsh, but when you look
do you mean in terms? What do you when he says like a non-league team? Do you
in the decision making
positioning where they should be running?
Occasionally positioning, and occasionally decision, and moreover decision making. And I'd certainly agree. I think they get into some good positions. I really do at times, but I do think it's their decision making. Sometimes they'll try and make a pass that's never there. Then they'll try and put a cross in and won't beat the first man, or they'll plug it out of play, or they won't take the shot on when the opportunity's there. So I can see that logic that their decision making in the final third is really poor, and it has been apart from the 3 wins. So we played 12 games. Apart from those 3 wins. I would agree that in those other 9 games, their decision making in and around the penalty area has been pretty poor, and it was evident again at Derby that for all their dominance at Pitt for 20 odd minutes in each half, how many times has the goalkeeper actually been worked properly? And I don't mean like the odd tap shot where he just goes, "Okay, thanks very much," and it's classed as a shot on target, but we know really it's.
You mean full ability, diving in corners?
Yeah, actually testing, making him work hard for his salary. I just think, and I just look at them and I think they lack quality in that final area. And obviously now losing Liam Miller and that news that we knew about before the game, but we were asked to sort of keep it under our hat until the manager revealed it. That is devastating news, first and foremost for Liam, because obviously, this was a big move for him, a big permanent move for a decent amount of money. He settled in well. He looked a real threat, and obviously, and also a blow for City as well, because they've got one of their primary summer targets is now out for the season. So it's up to somebody else to come and step in. But they just lack. And we've talked about this before, the striker situation. The fact they didn't get that third striker, they're now relying on Bedia, who's shown bits and pieces. Pedro, he had 5 touches against Burnley. He did even less when he came on. He gave away a daft free kick at Derby in stoppage time, which they got away with. So I've seen nothing from him yet. And Burstow, as you touched on yourself, Flex, we're only seeing bits and pieces from him. But it suggests that in training, he's not shown enough either to get in above Pedro or Bedia, or purely that Walter thinks that Bedia / Pedro is more suited for that system.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? It's because if Bairstow's not putting it in training and we're not spygating, we can't see what's going on. If the management and the coaching staff think he's not doing enough, what more does he have to do when the output of Bedia and João Pedro is, was it 2 goals? 2 goals between them. Pedro obviously has played nowhere near as much football as Chris Bedia.
Yeah, Bedia's got a penalty in the goal at QPR. Yeah.
But we've seen flashes from Bedia of his brilliance, like the overhead kick shows that he's confident. I think Bedia. I'm trying to think of this forward. It might have been Latte Laff last year, who ended up in the second half of the season absolutely going hell for leather and wild with his goal scoring. But the first half of the season, he nearly drew a blank in every single game. I think it's just a case of if he gets 1 or 2, if he can score against Pompey and then back that up with another, strikers, their bread and butter is goals. Their bread and butter is they're in the team because they're there to have shots at goal, and I sympathise with them a little bit on the basis that I don't think they get enough service, which is what you've referenced in terms of the crossing. And I think that's what frustrates Tim Volta, because I think if Tim Volta had his way and he was to condense numbers down and look at areas of the pitch, and one of the things he would want to see, apart from goals, of course, I think he would want to see that Hull City are putting in the most crosses of any team in the division. And at the moment, I think they sit about 7th or 8th in terms of accuracy. So the supply in terms of quantity is there in the squad, but then the quality of delivery. So what does that come down to? Is it the speed of thought? Is it the speed of delivery? Is it the fine margins? Are they predictable? Are they unpredictable when it comes to this? It's fans will have. I think the fans will have quite a split opinion on this. I don't think it's something really that's bubbling away on social media, but we know, and the fans that go home and away know, is that crossing is a clear identity that Hull City have this year. And if the crossing doesn't work, then the goals aren't going to materialise. But what I am confident in is that people like Simons are having shots from the edge of the area, because if a cross comes in and it gets nodded out and there's someone there on the edge of the area to at least have the gumption to go for it, at least there's going to be some form of second phase, which might test the goalkeeper.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to, I still think they're paying for the fact they didn't get that striker in. I say the third striker. Yes, Pedro has in effect become that third striker. But
remember, he scored technically on his debut, didn't he? Yes, it was offside, but he got into the right area, made a really good run.
Yeah, I still think they've missed out on signing a player like Tom Cannon. Who obviously decided he didn't want a permanent move away from Leicester City. He then went on loan to Stoke, and I think he scored his 5th goal for Stoke last night in their Carabao Cup exit on penalties. Sorry, not on penalties. That was the other game. They lost 3-2, having been 2-0 down. Southampton scored late. But yeah, and obviously they went for Tommy Conway, who started to score for Borough. That's that sort of profile of striker that they wanted in the summer. And were unable to get, and I think they are paying for it now, and I think they will continue to pay for it, because I don't see the goals coming from Burstow, Bedia, or João Pedro. Look, obviously, I hope to God I'm wrong, but I can only base my opinion on what I've seen in the opening 12 games of the season, and I've not seen. If one of them is going to start scoring, it probably is going to be Bedia, largely because he's seems to be the preferred choice, and he does get himself into some good positions. He missed a good chance at QPR. He missed a header from 6 yards at Norwich, which would have made a massive difference. He obviously had the air shot at Pride Park, so he's getting into the positions. And ultimately, he's got to players have got to take responsibility, and that it all comes down to that, isn't it? You can have Bellumi on one side, who I think has fizzled out in the last couple of weeks, in fairness. At times, I think I come back to my point at the top about Simons, about players being young and raw, and they will drift in and drift out, and they are inconsistent. And I think Bellumi is sort of fizzled out in the last few weeks. But he'll come good again, because he's got obvious quality. Kamara, the same on the other side. It looks like it is going to be Kamara who's preferred now, with Liam Miller unfortunately sidelined. These players have got to step up. These players have got to, if they want to be challenging for the top 6, then these players are the ones that have got to, find the answer to the questions. And on that subject, I'll come back to wingers, because I wanted to raise that as a topic. But just wanted to ask you about Paul Warne, who I've got to say is a fantastic guy to speak to. Spent a bit of time in his company, probably 5-6 years ago, when he was Rotherham manager very briefly. But anyway, before the game against City, he said in his press conference at Moor Farm that he felt that City would be genuine challengers for the top 6. So after the game on Saturday, I sat down with him and we talked about that, and I asked him, you've now, because I think he'd watched 3 games. I think he'd watched the opening game against Bristol City, the Sheffield United game, and then the Burnley game, although he left the Burnley game just before the end to try and evade the traffic, which was probably a good thing, because he'd still be there now. But I think
excuse me,
he did say that he felt that City were top 6 contenders, that he felt that was a top 6 team. And that they have had a slow start, but he felt that as the season wore on, they would get better and they would be that kind of team, which I thought was really interesting. And and to be fair, after we'd finished recording, he did say words to the effect of, "I'm not talking nonsense," just to say it on record. I genuinely believe that. So that's, for those of us, myself included, that have questioned and continue to question the longevity of this style that Tim Walters adopted and whether it's going to work long term. Paul Warne believes that they are a team capable, which I think is really interesting. What do you think?
Yeah,
and encouraging, and really, genuinely encouraging. That is to hear that.
It is, 100%. I still think this season we haven't seen enough 8, 9 out of 10 performances from Hull City. Now, some of those games we can parcel up together and say this was a transitional period. The Burnley game was definitely, for me, sort of 7.5, 8 out of 10 in that first half, even though Miller got substituted off. And I think that first half against Burnley, going in 1-0 at half-time against the team which I think are going to be top 2, maybe, or top end of the playoff places, Scott Parker's Burnley, we gave them a really good game. And, okay, they've got a few injuries, but then there's going to be so many situations this year where City are going to have injuries. Yeah. The opposition are going to have injuries. You play, that old saying, you play what's in front of you at the end of the day. So, Paul Warne's been around the game long enough at a respectable level of the Championship and League One, where he will have seen various different styles. And what I found interesting about what Paul Warne says and what Adams said in his post-match with Radio Derby, they were talking about the movement of City. And he said they found it so bizarre, but it gave them a lift because it showed that football can be played in a different way and still be relatively effective. Saying how having 10 players in your opposing half on a consistent basis makes it really challenging for them, and it has to up their game because they know that they're just going to be under the cosh all of the time. So from an opposition point of view, they might think, well, if they're going to play this kind of attacking football and this pressure, they can see that City have something going forward. We have had more minutes to watch them, and I think we've seen more sides to Hull City, which is the case. We could say what we want about Derby County, but I bet there'll be one Tuesday night where they go somewhere and they might get pumped 4-0 and they play absolutely horrendous. But we know that every player who plays in a certain position on their night can deliver exceptional rewards for the team. And if Paul Warne thinks that they can get in the top 6, that's definitely encouraging and refreshing to hear, as long as the buy-in from the fan base, etc., is there. I did a question, funnily enough, last week after trying to remember which game it was. It might have been before the Burnley game, and it wasn't something to try and poke the club with a stick. I just genuinely wanted to know where a small sample of fans think that Hull City are going to finish this season from what we've seen so far. And the percentage of people who said 9th to 16th was in the high 70s. So let's call it 3/4 of a sample, which I think was around 350, which I accept is by far and away not the full consensus of the fan base. But that kind of percentage wouldn't spread out too far if you times it by 10. So it's interesting to see that some of our fans think differently to somebody who's been around the game for a considerable length of time. I'm interested to know what exactly he thinks gets them in the top 6, whether it's just names on paper or what he saw from the team that afternoon that, let's be honest, if you've referenced Baz and I've referenced, wasn't an 8 out of 10 performance. There's something there.
Yeah, I think he said, quite openly that he thought they were rubbish against Bristol City. He thought they were better against Sheffield United, and obviously and much better against Burnley, and probably should have won the game. So, and I think that's a fair assessment. I thought they were rubbish against Bristol City and lucky to get away with a point. Oscar Estepinian's penalty in stoppage time did that. But and as he points out, that they are, because of their recruitment and because of the fact it is a work in progress, they will get better as the season goes on, and the fact they play the style they play. But if that is going to happen, they're going to have to start winning some games and fairly quickly, because very quickly in the Championship you can get cut adrift. That gap to the playoffs can very quickly go from being 5 or 6 points, which is manageable at this stage of the season, to 12, 14 points if you keep not winning games. And City are 4 without a win. And that dovetails nicely into Saturday's game against a Pompey team that are bottom of the table and struggling. Yeah, really struggling. Although they're it's funny, isn't it? Because at Frapp, you always think, and we talked about this before when we were previewing this block of 6 games up to the November break, that you were playing the 3 promoted teams, of which 2 of them were away from home, and you always, and it was the same when City came up from League One. And it's the same again in every league, that a promoted team needs their home form to be the bedrock of their season. If they're going to stay up and thrive, then they have to get a lot of their points at home, be difficult to beat at home, and then whatever you can get away is a bonus. Derby and Oxford are both very good at home. Pompey, on the flip side, are absolutely woeful at home, haven't won yet, but away from home have got the 13th best away record in the division. Yeah. I think they've won 1, drawn 2, and lost 3. Compare that with Hull City, who are at home, have won 1 in 6 and are 22nd in the home table. And we all know about what it's been like watching Hull City at the MKM Stadium so far in 2024. Not much fun. 3 wins since the turn of the year. And I know that Tim Walter hasn't been in charge for all of those, of course. But 1 win in 6 at home, 1 win in 7 if you include the Sheffield Wednesday Cup tie. That isn't good enough. And if City are to become what Paul Warne thinks they can be, and what Tim Walter thinks they can be, and what we all hope they can be, is a team that challenges for the top 6, that is something that they have to arrest. And I think this is a big, for me, we're coming into a really big week, because you've got 3 games going into the break. 2 of them are at home. 2 of them are against newly promoted teams. I think it is probably too early to be labelling games, at the end of October, beginning of November as must win. But my sentiment, hear me out, my sentiment is that if Hull City, we're getting towards a stage of the season now where we're pretty much a quarter of the way through. If they want to, what's their identity and what's their end goal? If their end goal is to be a capable team of getting into the top 6, beating Portsmouth at home is a must for me. Anything less than 3 points against Portsmouth, and I know it's one fixture in isolation, and it's one result in isolation, and they could lose to Portsmouth and theoretically go and beat Oxford and West Brom, and then they could win 2 or 3 games on the spin, like we've seen before. That will come out in the wash. But in this fixture in isolation, I think is really important for them, because they are playing a team at the bottom of the table. The last time they did that, they pumped Cardiff 4-1. Portsmouth have got all kinds of difficulties. Confidence is not great. I know the manager, John Messinio, has been mildly critical of his own players in the last couple of weeks for various things. And I think confidence-wise, for players and for supporters, this is so important. It really is so important. If they were to beat Portsmouth, they're looking up again. They go to Oxford on Tuesday night in good heart. They could win that game. But I just think the narrative around, and we know how difficult and painful at times watching City at the MKM Stadium has been throughout 2024. This has to be nothing else than 3 points.
Oh, certainly. I think you beat what's put in front of you, or play what's put in front of you. But Portsmouth at home is one of those games that at the start of the season, you look at it and you think, right, that and Oxford and Derby at home especially, they're the games you've got to go and win, and then you've got to try and beat them away as well, as the 3 teams that have earned the right to come into the Championship. I'm trying to put my sentences together in a way that doesn't sound like I'm gaslighting, because I don't want to do that. But I think if Hull City don't win against Portsmouth, this run of form of 5 without a win, it would be, I think, would just tap into the minds a little bit of some fans who maybe are on the fence with how things are going, or look at the team positively and still say they're in transition. I think it certainly feels like a must-win for me. And I want to look at it positively and say that this is an opportunity for players like Beddy and players who maybe don't have the numbers against their name in certain areas for them to go on and kick on. We don't have the right, and we don't have the arrogance to say that this is a banker, because it's not. And Portsmouth will, we can already use the phrase, I guess, the scrapping down at the bottom end of the table looking for points, but they're a dangerous team away from home because they put, was it 3 past Leeds United on the opening day of the season, or it was, forgive me, I'm forgetting the result. I can't remember if it was 3-2 to Leeds or a 3-3 draw. But that proves that they can go on that one game in isolation and they can be a test for anybody, because people think Leeds United are going to be, cruising away at the top of the championship, or at least in the top 2. So let's package it all together. If Paul Warne thinks they're a top 6 team, if the club think they're a top 6 team, the objectives of the season are different to Portsmouth's.
Yeah.
So they will perceive this game to be a must win. And if they don't win, then there's going to be a reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They did score 3 at Leeds on the opening day. I mean, it's the opening day, so I don't know how much we can take into that. They've gone away to Middlesbrough. They've scored 2. They've gone away to Burnley and scored. They did get.
So they're not afraid. They don't fear these big teams.
No, and nor should they. They did get beat 6-1 at Stoke. They lost at Cardiff in the last away game without scoring. But they did. They have also won at QPR, but then QPR look this season at home to be a real struggle. They have, in fact, what I would say is away from home, no team has conceded more than the 16 that Portsmouth have. So they are a team that might score, but they're also a team that do concede. And I think for City, I just think the optics of it are they as you say, it's 4 games without a win. If they don't beat Portsmouth, then you go, well, they've got a point at Derby and then either got a point at Portsmouth or none. That's not a great return against teams that have just come up. And if you are, I keep coming back to it, if you are a team that has got designs on being towards the top end of the league, these are games you have to win, with all due respect to Portsmouth and Derby and Oxford United. A clean sheet would help. I think keeping a clean sheet gives them a chance. In the minute, they've had 1 clean sheet all season. They're having to score 2 goals to win a game, and they're not generally, those 3 wins aside, they're not creating enough chances to win football matches. They're not having enough quality shots on goal and enough pressure in and around the penalty area to win football matches and create those moments that do that. So this is a game that fans will be turning up. 20,000 will turn up on the Saturday afternoon, expecting to see their side come out and perform, and they have to. There's going to come a point in the season where City have to start performing, and you can't allow it to go 5 games without a victory. And that's just not good for confidence. And there are fans already, rightly so as well, because they're entitled to asking questions about where we're going and what's happening. And I think 3 points. They're only 5 points off the top 6 at the minute. That in a 3-game week in the Championship, that can very quickly become 8-10. And suddenly that, even at this early stage, that is a big ask, particularly when you factor in the form and you're not scoring goals, and your best player, one of your best players in Miller, is now out for the season. So, look, I think they will win on Saturday. I would give for a regulation 2-0 win, just to keep a clean sheet, try and get the goal difference back towards back towards the positive, and just kind of end that run. We don't like runs, do we? Particularly, sorry, I'll rephrase that. We don't like negative runs. And at the minute, they're on a negative run of 4 games without a win. That win against Cardiff feels an awful long time ago. The 3 wins against Cardiff, Stoke, and QPR feel a long time ago, and they need to get back into that rhythm of winning football matches. And if they can beat Pompey, then they go to Oxford Tuesday night full of confidence, full of beans. Obviously, Oxford are decent at home, but that is a game that again, I keep saying it, is entirely winnable, as every game is at this level. The Championship is a bang average league this year. Nobody's going to run away with it. Everybody's beatable, and City have to draw a line in the sand and forget what's gone before and start winning games again and get into that mindset of winning games, because very quickly 5 can become 6, can become 7, and the last thing you want to be doing is going into that international break without a win. And 3 games in a week, if you get off to a poor start in the first one, very quickly that can happen. Let's hope it doesn't, because I think they've got more than enough. But it is up to players, individuals, to take responsibility, and that brings me on to my next point, Fletch. Abdoush Amir, since he came into the side, obviously last January, or when he arrived at the club in January, he's played 27 games, and his output is 3 assists. Am I being harsh to say that we're not getting enough out of a player that we know has got obvious talent?
I think it's hard, because I think what you have is, forgive me for bringing up Rosenia Ball again, or Rosie Ball, but I think Irma had a much more influential impact without churning out assists under Liam Rosenia. I think he played in a different way, where his short passing and his movement was very complementary to what other players like Philogene and Carvalho and when he was fit, Delap. I think the emphasis was on them to go and get the goals and maybe set up people, whereas I think Amir's was primarily a playmaker. I'm slightly disappointed with the fact that I don't think he's been given as much game time as he should be allowed. But then again, is Balumi, if he's playing right wing, getting the better of him in training? I mean, Balumi's already scored a couple of goals. I don't fancy him on the left, to be honest, from what I've seen from him. But then again, the idea of playing with just an out-and-out number 10 is where I see him. But it doesn't really feel like we play with an out-and-out number 10. If anything, we play with like 2 number 8s that like to become number 10s, or even a centre half likes to become a number 10. So it's really difficult to find, because I really like Abdoush. I do. And I think we all do. And I totally understand why you're raising the point of he's not had a number of assists. For me, he's a very good player when the ball is dead at his feet in set-piece situations, for me. But we've just never seen it in a black and amber shirt. I think when he was at Trabzonspor, he looked a different player. I don't think it's helped that he was brought in under Liam Rosenia to boost the team, and then all of a sudden most of his teammates have suddenly gone away again in such a short period of time, so he's starting again with a whole new squad. Because let's be honest, every player is different. It may be that he's content and he likes the people around him, which I sincerely hope he does, but then again, he's got to show the management, he's got to show the staff that he deserves the right to start. And that harpers way back to when I was saying that it's a case that there's been players this season that haven't been able to put together chain together a bigger quantity of minutes. Because Abdoush reminds me of a player who looks like he thrives on consistent game time, consistent tactical agenda to get his way. And I think that we've effectively got a player that they're not getting the best out of. And if you do get the best out of him, he would be a real asset.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he is, technically a very, very gifted footballer, but you've got to get him in the right areas. He's only played 90 minutes. He's only played 2 90 minutes so far. I think in total he's only played 587 minutes spread across the start of the season. Obviously, he started the season stuck out on the right flank, which was never any great shakes for anybody. And you're not getting the best out of him. He needs to play centrally. He needs to be that number 10 and get him on the ball in and around the penalty area where he can thread his little balls through to Kamara, to Balumi, to Bedia, even if it's to Louis Corn or Cody Drame, who I think has been very good on the side note, Drame, since going at left back. I just think it's mad that you've got a player of his undoubted technical ability, particularly on the ball, and you can't find a way to get him in the team and then get him in the team and get him to be effective, because he's playing him out on the playing him out on the left or the right. You may as well not bother.
He's wasted on the left.
Yeah, totally wasted. Totally wasted. Although defensively, he does do a job defensively. But I don't want it.
You want him up the pitch.
I don't want him in the team. I don't want him in my team to be doing defensive work. I want him in the team to be creating and scoring. And I think, we all said last year that him coming in January was perfect, because you'd got a player like Carvalho in the team who was going to play every single game, and it gave Abdouche the time to settle in, to find his way. Drip feed him into games and get him up. There was no pressure on him to come in instantly like there was Carvalho and hit the ground running, score and assist, and create goals in whatever way that takes. So in whatever shape that forms. But I think because now he is the main man. Carvalho's gone, Philigine's gone, all those creative influences have gone. Abdouche now needs to be the main man, and I think he's got to step up and grab that shirt and grab games by the scruff of the neck. He's got that ability to dictate a game, to run a game and create moments, whether it be for himself or others, or whether he drives through midfield and he plays in Kamari, then crosses for Benny to score. That's not that's not an assist, but it's a goal involvement. I just think there's so much more in his locker that can be unlocked, but it's criminal in many ways that you've got a player of that ability that isn't performing, and you're not getting the best out of him in a team that isn't creating anywhere near what it should be for a team that wants to play, an attacking style of play. Because at times this season, it's been pulling your teeth out job. It hasn't been exciting. It's been as dull as ditch water. But I think, and that's not what we were sold. So I think that a player like Abdouche can be, instrumental in that. But equally, he's got to be given his opportunity. He's got to take it. But you've also got to play him in an area that you can get the best out of him. And as I say, sticking him out on the flank, you may as well, stick him in goal as that. It's a complete and utter waste of time, because it's a square peg in a round hole that just is never going to work. And it's to his detriment, but more importantly to the team's detriment, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's a question of relationships as well, isn't it? Because let's go back to the training ground. If you put him out wide, I still think he's one of the best crossers in the team. He can peel off though, can't he?
He can peel off into that. Yeah. He can peel off and still put crosses in, even if he is playing that central role.
Do you know what he is? And this is going to sound so daft. He is the assister of the assist.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
He's got that power to be, but we're not seeing it anywhere near enough. And hence why, you should be looking at his stats and you should be saying 90 minutes, blah, blah, blah. He should be that focal point. And the fact he isn't, it could be any number of reasons. It could be he's not been fully fit, or etc. Walter's obviously not playing him in that role for a reason. So maybe he's not pulling his weight in training. We don't know. But I just feel that there's such an opportunity with Abdouche, that there is such quality there. They've got to find a way. And he cost a lot of money as well. Let's not shy away from that. There's a player there that they've got to get the most out of. Springing on to one final point, a player that they've got to find, that they paid a lot of money for and got to find a way of getting something out of. And it dovetails back into the Liam Miller discussion, is Doken Sinek. Now, before we get too in depth on Doken, because obviously he's some sort of an enigma. He's played a few minutes in the last, it's more than a year now. His last outing for City in a competitive game was coming on when they were well beaten at Ipswich Town early October last year. So that's over a year ago. What Miller's injury does, Fletch, is it opens up an opportunity, doesn't it? You would think that Balumi is nailed in on one side. You've now got Ryan Longman coming back, and he looked bright in pre-season. But you would argue that three goals and three assists last season is not stats of a player that is going to fill you with confidence and get you to the playoffs. We said it back in the summer that they're losing Jadon Philogene with 12 assists and 9 goals or whatever it was, and replaced him with Ryan Longman, who's got 3 assists and 3 goals, and I think he's only got 7 assists and 6 goals in 107 championship appearances. So his stats aren't great, But we know with Ryan that he's got an incredible work ethic and he's got potential. And we've seen it. And we saw flashes of it in pre-season before he did his shoulder at Reading. He's on his way back. You've got Will Jarvis, who is still a raw talent. You've got Kamara. That is an opportunity. And of course, Cynic now, that we've got nobody has the faintest idea what he's going to be like if and when he gets an opportunity. And I know
is he fit? Where's he at the moment in terms of fitness?
He's back in training. He's available. I think he's available for selection. I know. I wasn't able to do the press conference last week before the Derby game, but I do know that Walter was asked about Cynic and just wouldn't talk about it. He was like, "That's not something I want to talk about," which is okay. I mean, it's a reasonable question. Fans want to know about Cynic, but he felt he didn't want to discuss it, so that was that. But they have got options there, haven't they? And it is now up to somebody to Liam Miller, had he have been fit, would have probably been, in and out of international breaks, because Walter seemed to rest him for the game after he's travelling backwards and forwards to Canada. He would be the first choice. You'd have Miller on one side, Bellumi on the other, and everybody else would kind of have to play second fiddle and hope for their opportunity. But now Miller's out for the season. It does create that open, doesn't it, for somebody to come in and say, right, I'm going to have that shirt. I'm going to step up and take my chance.
Well, I think by far and away at the moment, it's Kamara who should start on that side. I mean, one thing about Ryan Longman, when we saw him in pre-season, and the one thing I took away from it was his physique. He's clearly been hitting the gym and looking after himself, even though he's been injured.
Yeah,
he looked different. He looked like he built that strength, which reminds me of when Jared Bowen, I remember the first year Jared Bowen played, and then he came back in 2018-19. I remember speaking to John Eyre, and he said he's just been hitting the gym all pre-season. Like, he's been putting all the muscle in his legs. He's been getting himself, stocky so that he could play the way he wants to play. And I think Ryan Longman still has that commitment and that desire to make sure that he can be a Hull City player for the long term. I still think that. Okay, he went out on loan to Millwall, but that was the choice of the club at the time and for all parties involved. But I think people will possibly look when they see Ryan Longman on a team sheet and go, Ryan Longman's back. I don't think people are going to be massively overexcited that he's back amongst the team. But then that's up to Ryan now, and we both know Ryan, and we know he's a lovely lad. He's so determined to prove doubters wrong, because he gets a bad press, and we're let's be honest, we're talking about him negatively now, and I don't mean to.
I don't think we're talking negatively. I think we're dealing in facts that.
But I think you think back to times like when he was against Huddersfield, you could tell he didn't look as confident as we know he can be, and I think that's Ryan Longman in a team that's winning is a far different player to a team that's 4 or 5 games without a win, and I don't think I want Ryan Longman to become that player that digs you out of a hole if he gets that opportunity to play. But then Kamara, for me, he's the clear and obvious choice, and now he's in the position of going. He's got no traffic around him for me to nail down this position in the team. But then he's got to back it up with goals and assists. Cynic is how many questions? It's like a mystery book with Cynic. I praise him for his commitment for sticking around as long as he had with the injury, because going back to Antalyaspor, when he went back to Antalyaspor, I thought, that's him, that summer.
Yeah.
Whatever season it was, I thought, that's it. They'll make it a permanent. He'll go back to play in Turkey. He'll be happy and he'll start pulling up trees in the Turkish league. But for him to still be around shows that there's clearly a desire and a commitment there for him to want to, actually prove the doubters wrong, because he's had such a bad record with injuries. But he still perseveres. And that's that's the thing about the depth of Hull City for me. I think there's plenty of players there that have that commitment and drive to take this club forward, going forward, pushing for that top 6. But it's going to be so hard for them to get in. because they've been out of the mix for so long, and they've got to basically start all over again as if they're like a depth signing coming in rather than being a star player being signed, for me.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, we're running out of time, so we're going to end it there. Quick prediction for the weekend, Fletch, because we've got a few seconds.
I'll go with a win. I'll go with a 2-0 win, like you said earlier, Baz.
Yeah, lovely job. Fletch, thanks for your time. Sending best wishes to Burnsy and Pruts. Hopefully the gang will be back together as normal next week when we can celebrate a Hull City home victory and look ahead to a trip to Oxford, where we hope there'll be some City fireworks. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. Keep getting in touch at the 1904 Club, and we will be back again soon.